If all your convictions were stripped away, if all your proud banners of morality and progress fell to ash, what would remain of you? A fragile husk, trembling before the silence of existence, or merely a shadow among shadows, repeating the borrowed words of the crowd? The question gnaws because it points to a truth so bitter that most would rather close their eyes than face it. You are not yourself. You are the echo of countless others, the living voice of the herd, and every thought you believe your own is nothing but a reflection of the will that uses you, consumes you, and casts you aside when the play of striving demands a new actor. The human being prides himself on reason, on the sovereignty of thought, yet observe how easily this sovereignty bends to applause, how swiftly convictions shift when a multitude begins to chant, how little one resists when the warmth of belonging whispers, agree, follow, conform. If man were truly a rational creature, truth would not alter with fashion, nor morality with geography. But truth does alter, morality does shift, and reason proves itself, again and again, to be not the ruler of man, but his servant and obedient secretary arranging excuses for desires that surge from a far deeper abyss. The blind will, insatiable, ceaseless, without aim or mercy. Thus we begin not with comfort, but with a wound. For to think is to tear oneself from the narcotic of consensus, to see the spectacle of the herd for what it is, not noble unity, but mutual contagion, where weakness disguises itself as virtue and fear wears the mask of solidarity. What then becomes of the individual? He is smothered, lulled, anesthetized until he disappears entirely. What is left is only the herd, trampling, endlessly striving, endlessly suffering, yet always convinced it marches towards something better, something higher, though it never arrives. Consider the multitude in its natural habitat, the street, the assembly, the market, the digital crowd of your own century. Watch closely, and you will see not individuals but currents, tides, waves sweeping through minds as if they were nothing but reeds swaying to the same gust of wind. The same opinions rise and fall with the rhythm of fashion. The same outrage burns and cools in unison. The same idols are raised, worshipped, and toppled. The herd does not think, it reacts. It echoes. It imitates. It fears the isolation of silence, for silence would reveal the emptiness of its own interior. The phenomenon of herd mind lies in this, that man, though born with a capacity for solitude and reflection, cannot endure it. He fears above all things the burden of himself, and so he flees into the safety of numbers, the narcotic of belonging, where he is relieved of the torment of thought. In the herd, responsibility dissolves. If all are guilty, no one is guilty. If all believe, the individual need not justify belief. If all suffer together, the pain feels lighter, though multiplied. What appears as solidarity is, in truth, cowardice disguised in virtue. Look at how swiftly a rumor grows in the crowd. One voice whispers, another repeats, a third adds embellishment, and soon thousands swear they have seen what never was, believed what never existed, condemned what they do not know. Does reason guide this? No reason lags behind, constructing excuses only after the fever has already spread. And should a solitary voice dare to object, to ask for proof, to question, the herd does not answer with arguments, but with outrage, with ridicule, with the ancient weapons of exclusion. For the herd cannot tolerate dissonance. To disagree is not merely to dissent, it is to threaten the narcotic dream of unity. Thus, the individual thinker is not met with curiosity, but with hostility. History itself is but the theater of herd mind. Wars declared because the multitude was inflamed by a symbol. Revolutions unleashed because slogans intoxicated the masses. Persecutions justified because belief, once shared by many, seemed too sacred to doubt. And yet, notice the irony. Those same masses who scream for blood today will tomorrow claim they never wanted it, that they were misled, that the fever overcame them. In this cowardly oscillation lies the essence of the herd. Brave in numbers, terrified alone. But why should this be so? Why should man, proud of his reason, surrender it so easily to the contagion of the many? It is because reason is not sovereign. It is the marionette of will. Man seeks above all the easing of his suffering, the satisfaction of his cravings, the anesthetic against his boredom. To belong to the herd offers him this: distraction, purpose, meaning without thought, certainty without proof. The price is individuality. The reward is oblivion. And yet, this oblivion is not true peace. For the herd, while it protects from solitude, multiplies anxiety. It inflames desires rather than extinguishes them. In the herd, man compares himself to others endlessly. Envy festers, vanity swells, ambition torments. He no longer strives for what he needs, but for what others seem to have. He no longer believes what is true, but what others appear to believe. Thus, the herd binds man not only with fear of exclusion, but with the chains of ceaseless desire, ever sharper, ever more insatiable. And so the herd, while promising comfort, delivers torment multiplied. Here lies the paradox. Man flees solitude because it confronts him with his nothingness. He flees into the herd to escape this terror. But in the herd he becomes not more real, but less an interchangeable part of a machine whose direction he cannot control, whose purpose he cannot know, whose destiny he cannot resist. The individual vanishes. Only the current remains. And the current, blind and violent, sweeps all toward the abyss. What then is the herd mind? It is the renunciation of self without the liberation of selflessness. It is slavery disguised as belonging, ignorance exalted as truth, fear celebrated as morality. It is the abdication of thought, the annihilation of individuality, the triumph of the blind will. The herd, as we have seen, is but the surface phenomenon. Beneath it lies the source, the engine, the abyss, from which all this irrational noise emerges. The will, not your conscious will, not the decisions you imagine you make, not the thin rationalizations you decorate your actions with. No, this will is deeper, darker, immeasurably indifferent to reason. It is the raw current of existence itself, the force that thrusts you into being, that keeps your heart beating without your consent, that drives hunger into your stomach and desire into your loins, that pushes you toward goals whose satisfaction only deepens your torment. This will does not know what it wants, because it cannot want something. It only wants wanting. It is not guided by purpose. It is guided by its own blind compulsion to persist, to strive, to expand, to consume. Imagine a fire. It burns not because it seeks warmth, not because it has a higher goal, but because burning is its essence. So too with the will. Your life is merely the crackle of this fire, consuming form after form, never satisfied, never still. Man believes he acts rationally, yet observe his striving. He builds cities, not for peace, but for greater striving within them. He invents machines, not to rest, but to accelerate his torment. He seeks power, wealth, recognition, yet upon achieving them, he finds only emptiness, and so he seeks again. Always he imagines that the next attainment will soothe him. Always he discovers the opposite, that satisfaction breeds boredom, and boredom awakens new craving. And thus, between suffering and boredom, existence is tossed like a pendulum, never resting, never free. Is this the story of the individual alone? No, it is the condition of the masses. The crowd is nothing but the will multiplied, the fire spreading from twig to forest, consuming all in its path. Here, reason is most clearly unmasked. What appears as progress, history, civilization, is merely the will in motion, shifting costumes, but always the same drama. Blind striving, fleeting satisfaction, inevitable disillusion. The masses, intoxicated by their own movement, mistake motion for direction, noise for truth, numbers for wisdom. And yet, beneath their shouting lies the same abyss, emptiness, fear, longing without end. Reason, that proud faculty, is in truth only the lantern the will holds in its hand. It shines just enough to illuminate a path already chosen, a desire already burning. Does the gambler calculate the odds because he seeks truth? No. He calculates to justify his compulsion to play. Does the ambitious man construct arguments for his superiority out of love of reason? No. He argues because the will in him demands recognition, demands conquest. Reason is not the sovereign of man. It is his lawyer, tirelessly defending desires that it never chose. And so it is with the herd. Observe a political movement, a religious frenzy, a social contagion. The multitude insists it acts from reason, from principle, from truth. Yet peel back the rhetoric, and you find nothing but the will's raw currents. Fear of exclusion, hunger for power, lust for recognition, the intoxication of unity. Principles change with the season, but the blind striving remains constant. Reason merely rearranges the words, paints new banners, invents noble-sounding excuses, but always, always, it is the same will at work. The irrationality of the masses is not accidental. It is essential. For if man were capable of true rationality, he would see through the game at once, and the play would collapse. He would perceive the endless futility of striving, the ceaseless recycling of illusions, the vanity of all progress, the repetition of suffering dressed in ever-changing costumes. To see this clearly would mean the death of the will. And so, instead, the will blinds its servants, keeping them intoxicated with dreams of better tomorrows, with myths of progress, with promises of redemption. The masses cling to these illusions because without them, their striving would reveal itself for what it is, a treadmill toward nothing, a fire feeding only on itself. Consider war. Each side believes itself noble, rational, justified. Each side convinces itself it fights for justice, for freedom, for truth. Yet beneath the slogans lies the same primal will, the lust for domination, the intoxication of violence, the thrill of destruction. Reason bends, writes manifestos, spins philosophies, pens stirring songs, but the fire of the will burns beneath it all. And when the slaughter ends, when the corpses rot, when the victors boast, what is gained? A new map, a new anthem, and soon the cycle begins again. The will demands new striving, new torment, new fire. Or look at your modern cult of progress. You imagine yourselves enlightened, rational, scientific, advanced. Yet what is this so-called progress but the will, once again, devouring itself in new forms? Machines promise comfort, but they create new desires, new dependencies, new chains. Knowledge multiplies, but so does confusion, so does vanity, so does despair. You rush forward, intoxicated by the speed of your own inventions, yet never ask, toward what? Toward nothing. Progress is merely the will's latest mask, persuading its slaves to run faster while chained to the same wheel. The irrationality of the masses is not a deviation from reason, it is the essence of existence. The will is irrational, and where the will rules, irrationality reigns. The multitude worships idols, not because they are fooled, but because they cannot endure the truth. They follow slogans, not because they believe, but because belief anesthetizes their fear. They cling to nations, to gods, to leaders, not because these are real, but because they protect from the terror of solitude. Reason cannot compete with this. It is too weak, too slow, too cold. The will ignites like fire. Reason follows, arranging excuses in its ash. What, then, becomes of the individual in this vast irrational machinery? He is not sovereign, not free, not rational. He is the puppet of the will, flung into existence without consent, compelled to strive without purpose, condemned to suffer without reason. His thoughts are the aftershocks of desire, his convictions the masks of his cravings, his morality the rationalization of his fear. And when he joins the herd, he multiplies his slavery, exchanging the torment of solitude for the intoxication of madness shared. The will is the hidden tyrant, the invisible fire, the eternal tormentor. And man, in his blindness, worships it, obeys it, justifies it, multiplies it. He calls it progress, justice, destiny, history. But strip away the words, and you see only the same fire burning, consuming, raging without aim, without end. The past is a graveyard, yet not of the dead alone, it is a graveyard of illusions. Each age swore it had finally grasped truth, that its gods were eternal, its institutions indestructible, its beliefs beyond doubt. And yet every tombstone whispers the same irony. That which seemed immortal proved fragile. That which was worshipped was later ridiculed. That which united the herd in sacred fervor dissolved into dust. What does this reveal? That the herd mind, inflamed by the will, creates illusions not to discover truth, but to survive its absence. Consider the Crusades. Tens of thousands marched under the banner of the cross, convinced they carried out divine justice. Yet beneath the hymns and prayers pulsed the same old currents. Lust for land, hunger for glory, the intoxication of holy violence. Fathers abandoned families, peasants left their fields, kings squandered wealth, all under the illusion of salvation. And what did they gain? Rivers of blood, ruins, graves, stretching from Jerusalem to Europe. The will disguised itself in piety, and the herd followed, ecstatic to dissolve their individuality into a cause too vast to question. Did they stop to ask if their God desired this carnage? No, for the will does not tolerate questions. It demands only striving, and reason obliges by inventing noble excuses. Or take the French Revolution. The masses, suffocated by oppression, rose in fury, They demanded liberty, equality, fraternity. Beautiful words, intoxicating slogans, so compelling that even today they echo as if eternal. But what was the reality? The guillotine became the symbol of this liberty. The blood of thousands, the foundation of this fraternity. Kings were replaced by tyrants, oppression by new forms of oppression, illusions by newer illusions. The will demanded upheaval, demanded destruction, demanded movement. Reason followed, writing pamphlets, singing anthems, declaring principles. And yet the suffering remained, only dressed in different clothes. Does this mean liberty was a mistake? No, it means that liberty itself, like every goal, is but another mask for the will's blind striving. Move further into your own century. Observe the totalitarian movements that swept across nations, hypnotizing millions. Crowds filled stadiums, chanting in unison, saluting with mechanical arms, surrendering thought to the intoxication of unity. They believed themselves part of destiny, part of history, part of something greater. And what followed? Camps, executions, wars of unimaginable scale. Once again, the will inflamed the masses, and reason stood helpless, reduced to propaganda, rationalizing the irrational. When the nightmare ended, the survivors claimed ignorance. We did not know, we did not choose, we were misled. Thus speaks the herd, always absolving itself, always denying its own intoxication. But why wander so far into history? Look around you, in the world you inhabit now. Observe the digital crowd. Millions staring into glowing screens, repeating slogans, echoing outrage, dissolving their individuality into virtual herds. A single phrase, a fleeting image, a whisper amplified, and suddenly a multitude roars with certainty, condemning, praising, exalting, destroying without thought, without proof, without pause. Do they believe they act freely? Yes. Do they imagine themselves rational? Yes. Yet all one sees is contagion. The will disguised as opinion, multiplying illusions at the speed of light. The herd has merely exchanged the marketplace for the screen, but the essence remains the same. Fear of solitude, intoxication with belonging, slavery to the blind will. Even in the quiet domain of daily life, the herd mind reveals itself. Observe fashion. Every year new colors, new shapes, new symbols declared essential. Those who wear them feel superior. Those who do not are ridiculed. And yet, a year later, the same garments are mocked, the same symbols discarded. Does anyone ask why? No, for the herd does not seek truth. It seeks approval. The will whispers. Strive, compare, envy, imitate. And so it continues, endlessly, with the same emptiness beneath. Consider also economics. Nations rise and fall with markets, with currencies, with numbers that most do not even understand. The herd panics, rejoices, despairs, all because abstract figures shift, symbols change, illusions fluctuate. The poor labor endlessly, convinced that wealth will save them from suffering. The rich strive endlessly, convinced that more wealth will finally satisfy them. Yet both remain trapped, both enslaved by the same will, both blinded by the same illusion that striving will lead to peace. The truth that striving is itself the torment they cannot bear. And so the herd praises work, exalts ambition, glorifies growth, always more, as if more could ever end the hunger of the will. And then there is war again, always war. Do not think it ended with your ancestors. It smolders still, ready to ignite wherever the herd is inflamed by fear, pride, or insult. One flag torn, one border disputed, one leader humiliated, and suddenly millions are ready to kill, to die, to burn entire cities. Does reason govern here? No, it merely invents noble justifications, defense, justice, freedom. But beneath it all is the same intoxication, the same blind will, the same herd dissolving individuality into madness shared. And when the ashes settle, the survivors, as always, whisper, "It was not our fault, we were misled." Thus, the cycle repeats. Even religion, that ancient refuge, is but the herd's narcotic. One people kneels before a cross, another before a crescent, another before the void of nothingness called atheism. Each is convinced its creed is eternal, its truths unquestionable, its rituals sacred. And yet history shows that all creeds rise, thrive, and fall. What was once holy becomes absurd. What was once heresy becomes sacred. Does this mean one creed is true and the others false? No, it means the will weaves illusions to keep the herd from despair, to anesthetize them against the terror of existence. And the herd, grateful for anesthesia, calls it salvation. Do you see the pattern? Whether in holy wars or revolutions, in markets or fashions, in digital mobs or stadium crowds, the same forces repeat. The will inflames, the herd dissolves individuality, reason rationalizes after the fact. The masks change, the costumes vary, the slogans shift, but beneath, it is always the same fire burning, the same striving without aim, the same irrationality dressed as destiny. What remains of man in all this? He imagines himself noble, rational, free, yet history proves him otherwise. He is clay in the hands of the will, swept by currents he neither chooses nor understands. The herd is his refuge, but also his prison, and in fleeing solitude, he surrenders the last fragment of freedom he might have possessed. If all this is true, that the herd is intoxication, that reason is but the servant of blind will, that history is only the endless recycling of illusions, what remains for the individual? Shall he throw himself into the torrent and let it sweep him away? Shall he fight against it, imagining he can bend the will to his own purpose? Or shall he, perceiving the futility, quietly withdraw, neither deceived nor enslaved, neither intoxicated nor blind? The path is narrow, and it is not one of triumph. It is not the heroic overcoming of existence, as Nietzsche would later fantasize, nor is it Kierkegaard's trembling leap into the arms of a deity who remains silent. It is quieter, colder, more sober. It is the path of liberation through renunciation. The first step is solitude, not the superficial solitude of being without company for a few hours, but the deep solitude in which one ceases to draw breath from the crowd. In solitude, the narcotic of belonging fades, and the nakedness of existence reveals itself. Here, the individual confronts his own nothingness, his own contingency, the abyss without masks. Most flee from this solitude, for it strips them of illusions. But for the few who endure, solitude becomes not despair, but clarity. Alone, one sees the herd for what it is, a machinery of distraction, a theater of mutual deception. Alone, one begins to feel the chains of the will and to glimpse the possibility of loosening them. Yet solitude alone is not enough, for the will burns even in isolation. Desire surges, longing persists, boredom gnaws. How then to weaken the tyranny of the will? Through art, not as entertainment, not as consumption, but as contemplation. When the individual contemplates beauty, whether in music, in painting, in nature, he momentarily ceases to be a creature of striving. He becomes pure perception, without desire, without aim. In these moments, the will loosens its grip, and existence is seen not as a battlefield of craving, but as form, color, sound. Music, above all, penetrates to the essence of the will, revealing it not as personal desire, but as the blind striving of the whole. To hear music is to perceive the will stripped of illusion, and in perceiving, to gain distance from it. From solitude and art arises compassion, not the sentimental compassion preached by religions as a path to reward, but the recognition that the same will burns in all beings, that the suffering you endure is mirrored in the suffering of others. Compassion is the rare moment in which the individual ceases to see others as rivals in striving and begins to see them as fellow prisoners. This does not redeem existence, nor abolish suffering, but it softens the cruelty of the will's rule. In compassion, the individual does not strive against others, but with them endures. It is a quiet solidarity, stripped of illusions, born not of slogans, but of shared torment. And finally comes renunciation. Not necessarily the physical withdrawal into asceticism, though. For some, this may be the final step, but the inner renunciation of illusion. The individual who sees clearly no longer believes in the promises of the herd, not in progress, not in salvation, not in immortality, not in wealth or power. He recognizes them all as masks of the will, as distractions that deepen slavery. Renunciation is not despair, though to the herd it appears as such. It is the quiet refusal to be deceived, the silent emancipation from intoxication. He still suffers, for suffering is bound to existence, but he no longer multiplies it with illusions. He accepts, he endures, he contemplates, he detaches. In this lies the only true dignity available to man. Some might protest, does this not mean life is meaningless? But the question itself reveals the intoxication of the herd. Why should life require meaning? Meaning is but another mask, another illusion woven by the will to keep striving alive. To renounce meaning is not to fall into despair, but to step outside the theater where the play of illusions endlessly repeats. The liberated one no longer demands that life justify itself. He sees it as it is: blind striving, ceaseless suffering, occasional respite, fleeting beauty. He neither praises nor condemns. He perceives, and in perceiving, he loosens the chain. Nietzsche would accuse this of weakness, of life denial. He would cry for affirmation, for the will to power, for the eternal recurrence of striving. But what is this except intoxication with the very fire that burns us? To affirm the will is to embrace the torment, to perpetuate the cycle. True liberation lies not in drunken affirmation, but in clear-eyed detachment. The strong man is not he who exalts the will, but he who dares to renounce it. Freud would later discover the unconscious. Yet, what is this unconscious but another name for the will I have described? And what did he find there? Desire, conflict, compulsion, striving without end. He sought to make man aware of it, to reconcile him with his instincts. But reconciliation is not liberation. Awareness without renunciation merely decorates the prison with mirrors. And Sartre, speaking of freedom, of man condemned to choose what freedom is this: if every choice arises from desires one did not choose, from a will one cannot master, his freedom is merely the freedom to rearrange chains. True emancipation is not in choice, but in release from the tyranny of choosing, in the quiet negation of striving itself. The path of liberation is not heroic, not glamorous, not fit for the applause of the herd. It is a path of withdrawal, of sobriety, of clarity. It demands solitude, contemplation, compassion, renunciation. Few will walk it, for most prefer intoxication. Yet for the rare few who dare to look existence in the face, to endure its silence without illusion, this path offers the only true liberation possible within the prison of being. And now we stand at the end, though not at a resolution, for there is no resolution. Existence does not resolve, it persists. The play does not conclude, it repeats. The will does not tire, it only shifts forms. You who have listened may hope for some final comfort, some whispered consolation that would soften the blow. But none can be given, for consolation is illusion, and illusion is the very chain we have sought to see through. What remains then is only clarity cold, merciless, yet strangely liberating. You have seen the herd, its intoxication, its contagions, its willingness to annihilate the individual in exchange for belonging. You have seen the will, blind, ceaseless, without purpose, devouring all it creates, driving man between suffering and boredom, enslaving reason and disguising itself in noble words. You have seen history, revolutions, wars, creeds, fashions, markets, all masks of the same irrational striving, all illusions destined to crumble, all triumphs ending in ash. You have seen the narrow path, solitude, art, compassion, renunciation, a path not of triumph, but of release, not of intoxication, but of sobriety. What, then, is left to say? Only this, that the life you cling to so desperately is not yours. It is the play of the will through you, the fire consuming you as it consumes all. Your thoughts are not free, your desires not chosen, your striving not guided. You are not the master of your existence, you are its stage, its vessel, its fleeting mask. The sooner this truth is seen, the sooner illusion falls, the sooner you cease to chase phantoms through the marketplace of the herd. But perhaps you recoil from this. Perhaps you ask, if everything is illusion, if striving is endless, if the herd is madness, why go on at all? The question trembles on the edge of despair. And yet, it is the most honest of questions. The one the herd always suppresses with its narcotics of faith, progress, entertainment. To live without illusion is to live without justification. And yet, this is the highest dignity, to endure without justification, to gaze upon existence with unblinking eyes, neither deceived by meaning nor intoxicated by hope. For is it not precisely in moments stripped of striving that existence reveals its quiet beauty? The stillness of a tree, the silence of the night sky, the fragile tones of music, these do not promise redemption, nor progress, nor salvation. They promise nothing, and in promising nothing, they release you, if only for a moment, from the tyranny of the will. To perceive without grasping, to endure without clinging, this is the closest we come to freedom. Yet the herd will never accept this. It cannot. It demands intoxication, slogans, idols, illusions. It will continue to march, to chant, to slaughter, to consume, always convinced it is building something eternal, always blind to the abyss beneath its feet. And perhaps you too will return to it after hearing these words. Perhaps you will rejoin the noise, the contagion, the endless striving. For solitude is heavy, clarity unbearable, renunciation bitter. But should a fragment of this truth linger in you, should a whisper of detachment remain, then you will no longer be entirely deceived. Even among the herd, you will remain apart. Even as you strive, you will know striving for what it is. Even as you suffer, you will see that suffering is the essence, not the accident, of existence. And even as you gaze into the illusions of others, you will not be wholly captured by them. The question remains, hanging in the silence after all words are spoken. If all this is so, if existence is striving without purpose, if the herd is intoxication, if reason is but the servant of the will, what will you do with this knowledge? Will you flee, as most do, back into the narcotic of illusions? Or will you dare, if only in fleeting moments, to endure the truth, to see existence without masks, to step aside from the herd and gaze into the abyss without trembling? No answer can be given. Each must face it alone. The herd cannot answer for you. The will cannot answer for you. I cannot answer for you. Only the silence remains, vast and indifferent, like the night sky that has watched over every illusion, every war, every striving, every failure. It waits, but it does not speak. And perhaps in that silence lies the only truth worthy of the name, that there is nothing to attain, nothing to justify, nothing to become. There is only the endless fire of the will and the fleeting possibility of loosening its chains. So I leave you not with comfort, not with promise, but with a question that will follow you into your solitude. If the herd mind destroys reason, if all striving is futility, if life itself is illusion, what remains of you?